If this video has found its way to your screen today, understand that in the realm of the psyche, there are no accidents. Carl Jung called this synchronicity, the moment the internal world and the external world align to deliver a message you can no longer ignore. You are here because you have reached the edge of a precipice that most of humanity spends their entire lives running from. Jung discovered that every soul reaching for wholeness eventually encounters what he termed the final test. It is not a test of your intellect or your strength, but a test of your capacity to survive the death of who you thought you were. Most people experiencing this threshold believe they are falling apart. They feel a heavy, inexplicable exhaustion with the world, a sudden silencing of their old ambitions, and a profound isolation that feels like a void. In modern society, this is labeled a crisis. It is medicated, diagnosed, and feared. But Jung saw something different. He saw a breakthrough disguised as a breakdown. He realized that the self, the true central core of your being, often has to shatter the persona to finally breathe. If you feel as though your world has collapsed, if the masks you once wore no longer fit, and if you are searching for a meaning that goes deeper than social success, then you haven't failed. You have passed. The question is, do you understand the secret that this passage has unlocked? Today, we are going to strip back the layers of this initiation. We are going to reveal why your suffering was actually a deliberate preparation, and how the secret Jung discovered in his own Red Book period is the key to the life that is waiting for you on the other side of this silence. To understand why you are here, you must first understand the brutal necessity of the collapse you have just endured. In the world of Carl Jung, nothing is ever truly lost. It is only transformed. But for transformation to occur, there must first be a total and uncompromising destruction. This is the stage of the alchemical death. And if you are watching this, it is the process that has been quietly dismantling your life from the inside out. Jung observed throughout his decades of study that the human personality is rarely built on a foundation of truth. Instead, we build our lives on a series of projections. Think of your psyche like a projector in a dark theater. For the first half of your life, you have been projecting your power, your value, and your sense of safety onto external screens. You projected your authority onto your bosses and mentors. You projected your capacity for happiness onto your romantic partners. You projected your sense of purpose onto your career titles and your social status. You weren't living your life. You were living a movie that you expected the world to star in. But the final test begins the moment the projector breaks. Suddenly, the screen goes dark. This is the moment of nigredo, the blackening. In alchemy, this was the first and most terrifying stage, the reduction of all materials to a uniform dark mass. In your life, this felt like a sudden, inexplicable loss of meaning. You looked at the career you worked years to build, and it felt like a pile of ash. You looked at the relationships you thought were permanent, and they felt like strangers. You looked in the mirror, and for the first time you didn't recognize the person staring back. This is the withdrawal of psychic energy. Most people, when they hit this stage, go into a state of absolute panic. They think they are experiencing a clinical breakdown. They think their brain is failing them. They desperately try to fix the situation by running back to the old versions of themselves. They try to rekindle dead relationships. They try to force enthusiasm for jobs they've outgrown. They try to buy new things to fill the silence. But you did something different. You stayed in the darkness. You felt the heavy, suffocating weight of the void, and you didn't run. And that is why you passed. You see, Jung realized a secret that modern psychology often misses. The psyche does not withdraw its energy unless it is preparing for a massive leap in evolution. Your energy didn't disappear. It went underground. It retreated from the external world because it was needed for the internal construction of a new self. The old you had to die because that version of you was a container that had become too small. You were a giant trying to live in a dollhouse, wondering why the walls were cracking. The final test is essentially a test of your willingness to let go of the corpse of your old identity. Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." But before you can choose what to become, you must stop being who you were told to be. You had to endure the death of the persona. The persona is the Greek word for mask. It is the functional part of our personality that handles the world. It's the good daughter, the successful entrepreneur, the reliable friend. We spend 20, 30, 40 years perfecting this mask. We make it so beautiful and so convincing that we eventually forget it's a mask. We start to believe that the mask is our soul. The final test shatters the mask. It makes it impossible for you to keep performing. This is why, lately, you have found it physically draining to be around people who still live in their personas. You can see the strings. You can hear the hollow echo of their small talk. You feel like an alien because you have lost the ability to pretend. You are standing naked in the truth of your own existence, stripped of the protective covering that society demands. This social and psychological death is terrifying because it leaves you without a map. In the old life, the map was simple. Do what is expected, seek approval, avoid rejection, and climb the ladder. In the alchemical death, the map is burned. You are standing in the middle of a psychological wasteland. But here is the secret Jung wanted you to understand. Only when you are truly lost to the world can you be found by the self. The reason the test had to be so painful, the reason it had to involve the loss of things you held dear, is that the ego is a stubborn architect. It will not abandon its fortress unless the walls are literally falling down. The suffering you experienced wasn't a sign that you were being punished by the universe. It was the universe's way of ensuring you wouldn't settle for a life of comfortable unconsciousness. You have passed through the fire of Nigredo. You have allowed the unauthentic parts of your life to be burned away. You have reached the point of temporal collapse, where the past no longer defines you and the future hasn't yet dared to speak. You are currently in the most sacred space in all of Jungian psychology, the space between identities. Most of humanity lives and dies without ever reaching this threshold. They stay in the first half of life, forever polishing their masks, forever projecting their power onto others, forever running from the silence. By passing this test, you have entered the second half of life, the era of individuation. You have proven that you are strong enough to survive the silence of God and the judgment of men. You are no longer a part of the collective machine. You are becoming an individual. The old you is dead, and the world may mourn that version of you. They may miss the version of you that was easier to control, easier to predict, and easier to understand. But you cannot go back. You have seen the secret behind the curtain. You have realized that the crisis was actually your soul's Independence Day. As we move into the next stages of this revelation, keep this truth close to your heart. The void you feel isn't empty. It is pregnant with the potential of everything you are about to become. The death stage is over. The rebirth has already begun. The birth of who you actually are begins in the one place you were taught never to look. Once the smoke of the initial collapse begins to clear, you aren't met with immediate light or a sense of relief. Instead, you are met with a mirror. But this isn't the mirror of the persona, the one that shows you your curated, polite, and socially acceptable self. This is the mirror of the shadow. Carl Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Most people fail the final test at this exact threshold. They can handle the loss of a career or even the end of a relationship, but they cannot handle the truth of their own internal architecture. They are terrified of what lies beneath the trapdoor of their conscious mind. But the reason you have passed is that you chose to keep your eyes open when the basement door swung wide. The shadow is everything about yourself that you have spent your entire life denying, repressing, and judging. From the moment you were a child, you were told which parts of you were good and which were bad. You were taught that anger is a sin, that selfishness is a failure, and that your deep primal ambitions were actually a form of arrogance. To survive in your family and to be accepted by your society, you took those unacceptable parts of yourself and shoved them into the darkness of the unconscious. You didn't delete them. You simply hid them from your own sight. But Jung discovered a terrifying law of the human psyche. What is repressed does not disappear. It grows, it ferments, and eventually, it begins to run your life from the dark. He called this fate. When you find yourself sabotaging a good relationship, or feeling a surge of inexplicable rage at a stranger, or falling into the same destructive patterns over and over again, that is your shadow demanding to be recognized. It is the part of you that has been starved of the light, now acting out in a desperate bid for existence. The final test presents you with what Jung called the resident shadow. This usually happens when life strips away your ability to feel like a good person. It arrives when you are backed into a corner and forced to make a choice that feels selfish, or when you feel a surge of jealousy that disgusts you. It is the moment you realize that you are capable of the very behaviors you have spent years condemning in others. You look at the person you've judged most harshly in your life, and you see their face in your own reflection. This realization often feels like a moral collapse. Feels as though you are losing your soul. You think, if I am capable of this darkness, then who am I? Am I a monster? This is the hinge of the secret. Most people at this point slam the door shut. They run back to their moral high ground. They start judging others even more harshly to prove to themselves that they are still pure. They become spiritual bypassers, pretending they are above human nature. But Jung warned that the person who pretends they have no shadow is the most dangerous person of all, because their shadow will eventually erupt in a way that destroys everything they love. You passed the test because you stayed in the room with your monster. You sat with your rage without letting it consume you. You acknowledged your capacity for cruelty without acting it out. You admitted to yourself the unadmissible truths. Yes, I have been manipulative. Yes, I have been selfish. Yes, I have a dark, hungry ambition that I've tried to mask with humility. By doing this, you performed the most sacred act in depth psychology: integration. Integration does not mean acting out your darkness. It means bringing the darkness into the light of consciousness so it no longer has power over you. Think of the shadow like a neglected, starving dog locked in a basement. If you keep it locked away, it will eventually break the door down and bite the first person it sees. But if you bring it upstairs, feed it, and give it a place by the fire, it becomes your most loyal protector. It provides you with the teeth you need to navigate a world that isn't always kind. Jung discovered that the shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply unlived life. It is the reservoir of your primal energy, your creativity, and your boundaries. When you integrate your shadow, your personality undergoes a radical shift. You notice that you are no longer nice in the weak, people-pleasing sense of the word. Instead, you become kind, which is a choice made from a position of absolute power. A person who is incapable of being dangerous isn't good. They are simply harmless. A truly good person is someone who is capable of great destruction but keeps their sword sheathed. You have developed what Jung called wholeness. A whole person is someone who knows they are capable of being a predator, but chooses to be a protector. Because you have faced your internal darkness, you can no longer be shamed by the world. You can no longer be manipulated by people who try to use your guilt against you. How can someone shame you for your darkness when you have already walked through it and claimed it as your own? This is the birth of true sovereignty. During this stage of the test, you likely felt a sudden, sharp clarity about the people around you. You started seeing their shadows with disturbing accuracy. You realized that the person who speaks the loudest about morality is often the one hiding the most corruption. You saw the passive aggressiveness in the people who claim to be helpers. You saw the profound insecurity behind the masks of the powerful. This discernment is a gift of the shadow, but it is also a burden. It makes it impossible to return to the innocence of your old life. You have eaten the apple of self-knowledge, and the Garden of Eden is closed to you forever. But look at your hands. Do you feel the weight returning to them? The energy that was withdrawn when your old life collapsed is coming back. But it is different now. It isn't the frantic, anxious energy of the ego trying to prove itself. It is the heavy, grounded energy of the integrated self. You are no longer trying to be light. You are becoming gold. And as any alchemist knows, gold is only found in the deepest, darkest, and most pressurized parts of the earth. You have faced the resident shadow. You have looked into the abyss and, instead of blinking, you invited the abyss to speak. You have admitted that you are both the saint and the sinner, the victim and the victimizer. By accepting your full nature, you have stopped being a fragment of a human being and started becoming a complete soul. You have passed the second stage. You have found your internal power. But now, the universe is going to test your ability to hold that power in a world that desperately wants you to remain small, predictable, and masked. The next step is the most visible death of all, the falling of the social mask that will change your relationships forever. There is a specific kind of loneliness that arrives after you have faced your shadow. It is not the loneliness of being forgotten, but the loneliness of being seen for who you truly are, and realizing that the world is no longer talking to you, but to a version of you that has ceased to exist. This is the stage of the final test known as the death of the persona. The word persona comes from the Latin term for the masks worn by actors in ancient theater. Jung realized that every human being wears one. It is the functional part of our personality that handles the expectations of the collective. It is the professional, the nurturer, the success story, or the good student. We spend the first half of our lives perfecting this mask, painting it with the colors of social approval and carving it to fit the shapes that our parents, our bosses, and our peers find acceptable. We do this because the mask is our protection. It is our currency. It is how we navigate a world that rewards performance and punishes raw truth. But as you pass the final test, maintaining this mask becomes a physical impossibility. The social death begins when you realize that you can no longer force enthusiasm for the performances of others, and you can no longer summon the energy to perform yourself. Have you noticed how small talk has recently become a form of psychological torture? Have you found yourself standing in the middle of a social gathering, watching the people around you exchange platitudes, and feeling as though you are observing a strange, hollow ritual from another planet? This isn't because you have lost your social skills. It is because your psyche has withdrawn its permission for you to lie. You have looked behind the curtain of your own soul, and once you have seen the depth of the ocean, you can no longer pretend to be satisfied with the shallow puddles of polite conversation. Jung warned that the greatest threat to the soul is to be completely swallowed by one's persona. When the mask becomes the face, the individual dies. The final test is a violent intervention by the self to prevent this death. It shatters the mask because the soul is suffocating behind it. This stage of the test is often the most painful because it involves the people you love. When your persona begins to crack, the people in your life, those who were comfortable with the old you, will become confused, frustrated, and even threatened. They have a vested interest in your mask. They like the version of you that never said no, or the version that was always the life of the party, or the version that was always the reliable, predictable worker. When you stop playing the role, you disrupt their reality. You may have heard them say, "You've changed," or "I don't know who you are anymore." They might suggest that you are going through a phase, or that you need help to get back to normal. But what they call normal was actually a state of high-functioning inauthenticity. They aren't worried about you. They are worried about the loss of the function you provided for them. Passing this test requires you to endure the social death. It requires you to be okay with being misunderstood. It requires you to watch friendships drift away and family dynamics shift without rushing to fix them by putting the mask back on. You have realized a secret that most people are too terrified to acknowledge. That most human connection is actually just a trade between two masks. Real connection, soul-to-soul connection, cannot begin until the persona falls away. During this period, you may feel like a ghost in your own life. You go to the same office, sit in the same chairs, and talk to the same people, but everything feels two-dimensional. This thinning of reality is a sign that you are no longer feeding the collective illusions. You are starting to live from what Jung called the individuated core. This shift is not just about being antisocial. It is about the redistribution of your life force. For years, you used 90% of your energy to maintain the mask, to worry about what people thought of you, to manage your reputation, and to ensure you were fitting in. Now that the mask has shattered, that energy is finally yours again. But it feels strange, feels heavy. It feels like a silence that the world wants to fill with noise. The secret of the falling mask is that it reveals your true authority. When you stop caring about being liked, you become capable of being respected. When you stop trying to be perfect for the eyes of others, you become present for the eyes of the self. You start to speak with a voice that is no longer filtered through the social censor. Your yes becomes a real yes, and your no becomes a boundary that no one can cross. The world will try to shame you back into the mask. They will call you selfish, cold, or arrogant. But you must understand that these are merely the weapons of people who are still trapped in their own personas. They are terrified of your freedom because it highlights their own imprisonment. Your authenticity acts as a mirror that shows them their own faking, and most people will hate the mirror before they hate the face. You have passed this stage because you have accepted the isolation. You have realized that it is better to be alone in your truth than to be surrounded by people in a lie. You have allowed the social version of you to die so that the essential version of you could finally breathe. But as the mask falls and you stand naked in your truth, you reach a place of absolute stillness. This is not the end of the journey. It is the eye of the storm. Beyond the social death lies a void, a space between worlds where the old life has ended, but the new life has not yet taken form. This is the great silence, and it is the most sacred part of the final test. You are now standing in the space where your new destiny is being forged. The world can no longer tell you who you are. The mirror has been shattered, and for the first time in your life, you are the one holding the pen. After the masks have fallen and the shadow has been integrated, you arrive at the most misunderstood stage of the final test. Jung called this the intermediate realm, but you likely know it as the Great Silence. It is the period where the external world stops reacting to you, and your internal world stops providing the familiar noise of anxiety, desire, and ambition. You find yourself sitting in a psychological void. Most people fail the test here because the silence is terrifying. In our modern world, we are conditioned to believe that nothing happening is a sign of failure. We are told that if we aren't growing, hustling, or manifesting, then we are regressing. So, when the psyche enters this period of total stillness, the ego panics. Feels like a depression. Feels like a loss of spark. You may feel as though you have lost your edge, or that your connection to the universe has been severed. But the secret Jung discovered is that this void is not an empty space. It is a vessel. In alchemy, this was the aludel, the hermetically sealed jar where the transformation actually takes place. For the lead to become gold, it must sit in the heat and the silence. Cannot be disturbed. Cannot be checked on every 5 minutes. It must simply be. You have passed this stage because you did not try to fill the void with noise. You didn't rush into a new relationship to avoid the silence. You didn't start a new business venture just to feel productive again. You didn't scroll through social media for 10 hours a day to drown out the quiet. Instead, you allowed the silence to do its work. You sat on the empty throne of your own life and waited. Jung observed that this silence is a necessary biological and psychological recalibration. For years, your nervous system was tuned to the frequency of the persona. You were constantly scanning for threats, looking for approval, and reacting to the demands of the collective. Your psychic energy was scattered across 1,000 different external points. Now that you have withdrawn those projections, that energy has returned to the center, but it doesn't know what to do yet. It is like a massive power grid that has been shut down for maintenance. This is the void of the throne, before a king or queen can be truly crowned in the Jungian sense. Meaning, before you can live as a sovereign individual, the seat of your soul must be empty. The old king, the ego-driven, approval-seeking self has died. But the new king, the integrated self, is still a child. It needs the protection of the silence to grow. Have you noticed how your sense of time has changed during this period? Days seem to stretch and blur. You may find yourself staring out of a window for 30 minutes, not thinking of anything in particular, and feeling a strange, heavy peace. This is the Nunc stans, the standing now. It is a state of consciousness where you are no longer haunted by the ghosts of the past or the anxieties of the future. You are finally, for the first time in your life, inhabiting the present moment. The world will look at you during this time and think you are stagnant. They will worry that you've lost your motivation. Even your own ego will whisper that you are wasting your life. But you must understand that in the realm of the soul, silence is the highest form of activity. Beneath the surface of your awareness, the transcendent function is at work. It is taking the pieces of your shattered persona and the raw energy of your integrated shadow and weaving them into a new garment. This is the womb of the second self. Jung discovered that those who can tolerate this void eventually experience a spontaneous reorganization. Without you doing anything, your interests will begin to shift. You will find yourself drawn to new subjects, new people, and new ways of being that feel right in a way you can't explain. This is not the trying of the ego. This is the unfolding of the self. The secret of the great silence is that it teaches you the most important lesson of sovereignty. That you are enough even when you are doing nothing. For most of your life, your value was tied to your output. How much you earned, how much you helped, how much you performed. The void strips all of that away. It asks you the ultimate question. Who are you when there is nothing to do, nowhere to go, and no one to impress? If you can stay in that question without flinching, you have passed the test. You have broken the addiction to external validation. You have realized that the throne is not a position you earn through struggle, but a state of being you occupy through presence. During this stage, you may experience many synchronicities. You might think of a person and they call you. You might have a question in your mind, and you walk past a bookstore where the answer is written on a cover in the window. These are the pulses of the new life beginning to beat. They are signs that you are no longer pushing against reality, but are finally flowing with the underlying current of the Tao. The great silence is where the mechanical universe ends and the meaningful universe begins. You are no longer a machine that needs to be fueled. You are a garden that is being watered. The transition is nearly complete. The void is starting to feel less like a vacuum and more like a solid foundation. You have sat in the silence. You have honored the void. You have allowed the old world to fade without grasping at its coattails. And because you did not blink, the silence is now beginning to speak. It is telling you that the final test was never about your destruction. It was about your purification. The weight in your hands is turning into light. The empty throne is no longer a sign of lack, but a sign of readiness. You are about to move from the stage of being to the stage of emerging. The integrated sovereign is ready to stand up. And when you do, the world will not see the person you used to be. They will see someone they do not recognize, but someone they cannot help but obey. The final test does not end with a loud celebration or a sudden return to your old life. Instead, it ends with a shift in your fundamental frequency. You have navigated the death of your persona, the confrontation with your shadow, the collapse of your social world, and the terrifying weight of the great silence. Now, you are stepping into the stage that Jung called the union of opposites. You are no longer a fragmented collection of social roles. You have emerged as the integrated sovereign. What does it mean to be sovereign? In the Jungian sense, sovereignty is the state of being ruled from within. Most of humanity is ruled from without, by the opinions of others, by the demands of the economy, by the traumas of their past, and by the primal fears of their ego. The sovereign, however, has claimed their own throne. You have looked at the darkest parts of your nature and integrated them. You have seen the hollowness of the social mask and discarded it. You have sat in the void and realized that you are the source of your own meaning. Because of this, you now possess what can only be described as a supernatural calm. This isn't the calm of someone who is disconnected or indifferent. It is the calm of someone who is unshakable. While the world around you panics over the shifting tides of politics, culture, or personal drama, you remain centered. You have already survived the underworld of your own psyche. You have faced the death of everything you thought you were. What can the external world possibly do to you that you haven't already navigated within the theater of your own soul? This calm is a beacon. People will be drawn to you because you provide a stable field in a chaotic world. They won't know why they feel safer in your presence, but it is because you are no longer projecting your own internal war onto them. You are at peace with your darkness, so you are no longer threatened by theirs. However, this emergence also brings with it a disturbing discernment. Because you are no longer lying to yourself, you have lost the ability to be lied to by others. You see through social masks instantly. You sense the hidden motivations, the repressed rage, and the desperate neediness in the people you encounter. You can see the shadow in a room before a single word is spoken. Jung noted that the integrated individual becomes a mirror for the collective. Your mere presence will make people uncomfortable because you reflect their own inauthenticity back to them. You don't have to say a word. Your silence, your eye contact, and your refusal to participate in persona games act as a silent judgment. This is why some people who used to be close to you may now avoid you. They aren't avoiding you. They are avoiding the truth that you represent. But those who are ready for their own awakening will be drawn to you with an intensity you have never experienced. The secret of the sovereign is the integration of the sword. You have realized that being a good person does not mean being harmless. True morality requires the capacity for destruction, tempered by the wisdom of the self. You have integrated your aggression, your ambition, and your selfishness. You are now dangerous and disciplined. You have the teeth of the shadow and the clarity of the consciousness. You no longer ask for permission to set a boundary. You simply set it, and the world instinctively respects it. You have reached what Jung called the individuation goal, the state where you are a unique individual, while remaining deeply connected to the human totality. You are no longer a type. You are not just a professional or a parent or a citizen. You are a one-of-a-kind expression of the life force. Your choices are no longer dictated by borrowed scripts. You don't do things because they are expected. You do them because they are true. This creates a new kind of effortless influence. You no longer hustle or strive in the way you used to. Instead, you command. When you speak, your words carry the weight of your integrated experience. When you move with the economy of someone who knows exactly who they are. You have stopped trying to be powerful, and in doing so, you have become power itself. During this stage, your relationship with synchronicity becomes a daily reality. The universe seems to cooperate with your internal state. Opportunities arrive without being chased. Resources appear exactly when they are needed. This is not magic in the superstitious sense. It is the natural result of alignment. When you are no longer at war with yourself, you stop being at war with reality. The great work of the alchemists was to create the philosopher's stone, a substance that could turn lead into gold. Jung realized the stone was a metaphor for the integrated self. You are the stone. Your presence turns the lead of daily life, the conflicts, the losses, the mundane tasks, into the gold of meaning. The final test has been passed. The initiation is complete. But as you stand on the shore of this new life, looking back at the wreckage of the person you used to be, you realize that the journey wasn't about becoming someone better. It was about becoming someone real. You have passed from the collective unconscious into individual consciousness. You are now a carrier of the light. You are one of the rare few who can say, without a hint of ego, I know who I am. But there is one final piece to this secret, a responsibility that comes with this new dimension of being. You haven't just healed yourself. You have mapped a territory for others. The sovereignty you have claimed is not for you alone. It is a gift to a world that is starving for authenticity. The weight in your hands has finally become light. The crown you wear is invisible, but it is felt by everyone you meet. You are ready for the final instruction. You are ready to live in the next dimension. The final secret of the test you have endured is this. Your life will never return to what you once called normal, and that is your greatest victory. Many people spend their entire existence praying for things to go back to the way they were, not realizing that the way they were was the very prison that was suffocating their soul. By passing this final test, you have not just survived a crisis. You have migrated to a different dimension of human experience altogether. Jung believed that the destiny of the human species does not rest in the hands of the masses, but in the hands of the individuals who are willing to do the grueling work of individuation. You are now a carrier of a higher consciousness. You are a bridge between the world of shadows and the world of light. Your suffering was not a mistake, it was not a punishment, and it was certainly not a waste of time. It was the labor pains required to give birth to a version of yourself that can handle the truth of existence without flinching. Your final instruction is to trust the internal compass that has replaced your social map. For the first half of your life, you looked outside for direction. You checked the weather of public opinion, the expectations of your family, and the trends of the collective to decide your next move. That map has been burned. In its place, you have developed a sense of the self. This is a quiet, steady voice that doesn't scream for attention, but speaks with the authority of absolute truth. When you face a decision now, you will notice that you no longer care about the correct answer. You only care about the true answer. Walk the path that feels right to your soul, even if it makes no sense to those who are still trapped in the performance of the persona. You have earned the right to be unreasonable in the eyes of the world, because your reasons now come from a place the world cannot see. Jung once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." For years, you let the world tell you, but now you are the one who speaks. You are the one who defines the boundary. You are the one who decides what has meaning. This is the dimension of psychological sovereignty. In this space, you no longer hope for miracles. You understand that you are the miracle. Your presence, your awareness, and your integrated nature are the most powerful forces you possess. As you step into this new life, you will find that you no longer need the crutches of your old identity. You don't need the constant validation. You don't need the frantic busyness to feel worthy. You have realized that the grand silence you feared in part 4 was actually the voice of God, or the self, reminding you that you are already complete. You have reached the apex of the mountain. And though the air is thin and the path is solitary, the view is unlike anything you could have imagined when you were still in the valley of the shadow. Your journey is unique, but you are not alone. You are now part of a silent aristocracy of souls who have faced their darkness and returned with the light. You will recognize them in the world by the way they look at you, with a calm, piercing recognition that transcends words. You are now a member of the rare group of humans who are truly awake. The final test was never meant to destroy you. It was a rigorous, loving intervention by your own psyche to break you open so that your light could finally shine through the cracks. Welcome to the first day of your real life. The masks are gone. The shadows are integrated. The throne is occupied. Carl Jung Daily is dedicated to being your companion on this path of individuation. This work is not for the faint of heart, but for those who are ready to claim their sovereignty. It is the only path worth walking. If this exploration of the final test resonated with the depths of your soul, ensure you are part of our growing collective. Subscribe to Carl Jung Daily and turn on the notification bell. We dive into these psychological mysteries every single day, providing you with the maps and tools you need to navigate the second half of your life. Like this video if you felt the shift within yourself today. It helps the algorithm find others who are currently trapped in the Negrito and desperately need to hear this message. I want to hear from the sovereigns watching this. Look back at the stages we discussed, the death of the persona, the shadow, the great silence. Comment below with the words, "I passed the test," and share which stage was the most difficult for you to navigate. Your story could be the exact synchronicity another viewer needs to see today to keep going. The final test is over. The great work continues. I will see you in the next dimension.